content producer here at Beyond Effects, and today we are doing our first ever BFX-U Spotlight session. Yes.
Yay.
I'm joined by our presenter, VFX artist Rachel Quitevis.
Hello,
Hello,
hello.
Rachel.
How's it going?
Very good. Very good. And your topic is, are you visually literate, crafting clear and satisfying VFX? I'm so excited that you are here on our pilot stream with us. Thank you
Oh,
for volunteering to go first.
yeah, of course. So am I. I'm jazzed to present this once more.
Yes. Yes. Awesome. Before we get into your presentation, I just wanted to quickly let everyone at home know what BFX-U is. So, BFX-U is our special banner for deep dive educational content at Beyond Effects. It's where we share some of our most in depth tutorials and presentations created by members of our team, including this spotlight session. And so these sessions were originally shown at major industry events like GDC, and they will now be available via Twitch and YouTube for you all. And over the coming months, we will be covering a range of skill levels here from beginner to advanced. So hopefully there's something here for everyone. And also, if you are new or looking to get started with VFX, we have our flagship VFX-U course called Learn with Us First Playable Grenade Explosion. It's a completely free 10-episode YouTube course that walks you through creating your very first grenade explosion in Unreal Engine from zero experience to a working effect. It's a great place to start if you want a solid project to follow along with. So, with all of that being said, Rachel, I am going to go off camera and off comms, but if you need anything, just give me a shout. And when you're done with your presentation, I'll come back and probably do a little bit of a Q&A and then close out the show.
Excellent.
Okay, so have fun and see you in like 45 minutes.
Excellent. Awesome.
All right,
All
take it
right.
away.
Well, welcome. Today we're gonna see if you're visually literate, and teach you how to craft a little bit more clear and satisfying visual effects. So my name's Rachel. I'm a visual effects artist at Beyond Effects, and Beyond Effects, as most of you know, is a co-development studio that specializes in real-time visual effects. But first, what the heck is visual literacy? Visual literacy is just the measure of the effectiveness of the use of our visual language. Good visual effects answers questions like, where do I go? Is this dangerous? Can I pick that thing up? Where do I hit this enemy to do the most damage, and when? It's why should we care? It is how we communicate with the player. Words are underrated. Visuals are much more fun. Visual indicators tell us when danger is imminent. What happens when I carry metal in a thunderstorm in the kingdom of Hyrule? Very bad things. But you know because of the visual literacy of the scene. You can anticipate the danger before it strikes. It's also important for immersion. It grounds the player in the game, making the world react to the player's actions, whether that's a reward or a consequence. It encourages play, exploration, and experimentation, or large-scale creative drawings in the snow. Satisfaction, also why we should care about visual literacy. We make the player's actions feel powerful. The best VFX triggers dopamine production in our brains, and it makes the player want to keep engaging. God of War without these special attacks and explosive visual effects would make slaying hundreds of Draugr for hours and hours a labor instead of a release. As game developers, we do our best to point our players in the direction of progress. Game developers that play video games are very familiar with the feeling of frustration when playing a game with a lacking visual language. While it's easy to blame user error from the game developer's point of view, it is ultimately our responsibility to provide the experience to the players. So, in the words of rapper and voice actor Ice-T, don't hate the player, hate the visual language. So let's go pull apart some good examples that check our three boxes of information, immersion, and satisfaction. If you played Breath of the Wild, this is a scene that you can hear. The devastating enemy attack tells you when to block it with a really obvious use of visual language. As soon as the Guardian's eye flashes, the player is prompted to press A. It is immediately followed by a very dramatically timed effect for a satisfying deflection that results in an explosive impact, which fills the entire screen with particles. The Guardian's weakness is obvious because the VFX literally creates a target around the eye, indicating the opportunity to deflect with flash. Both effects inform the player. The success of the deflection is indicated with the same intensity. Oh, let's go back one. It's reflected with the same intensity as the original enemy's attack, informing the player of success. And the following explosion is enormous, again, filling the whole entire frame with particles. Incredible damage has been dealt to the enemy with a perfectly timed button press that is spoon-fed to the player in a way that does not feel cheap or contrived. This encounter conveys an excellent example of visual literacy with the use of visual effects. Now onward to God of War. Designers and artists exercise visual literacy in every combat encounter. In this example, you are again given a straightforward and clear indication of when it's time to parry with a yellow ring, or when an attack is not blockable with a red ring. Each of these effects is quite simple, but they do the job effectively without hindering the character, the environment, the player, and the flashy combat effects. The timing of the repeat attack is taught intrinsically to the player through these indicator rings as well, teaching the player visually how to react to this enemy in the middle of the action. It carries forward satisfaction by communicating only using visuals. Information, block now or dodge now. Immersion and satisfaction. Successful block and a spray of awesome sparks. So let's talk about why these examples work. They inform, immerse, and satisfy. They're consistent with real life experience and the physical world despite taking place in a fictional setting. Even an untrained eye can identify that something is off with an unfinished or not quite satisfying visual effect because of their life experience. These effects also leave nothing to the imagination, or they inspire the imagination. The visual language is clear. I should block now. I should dodge now. The weak spot is on the enemy is here. They've provided information to the player that will directly support and reward their progression. But what determines successful visual literacy? What is exercised when building particle effects that speak or jump off the screen? And the answer is the 12 principles of animation, but for VFX. The most satisfying visual effects embody the 12 principles of animation, whether it is learned intrinsically through feel or through intentional application. Applying these fundamentals to visual effects Applying them to visual effects work elevates readability, immersion, satisfaction directly, and immersion. When applied thoughtfully, it makes an incredible impact on our work, often with only a small effort. Now, if you are a VFX artist or just an artist in general without fundamental experience with animation, like I used to be, this is your crash course. We will go over each of the animation principles, followed by an example from video games with visual effects. Afterwards, we will use what we've learned and apply it to some visual effects that needs improving. So let's begin. Oh, and before I continue, I did not quote this wonderful strip I made up. Oh, here we go. Visual effects are fundamentally animations. Applying animation practices should be fundamental to building visual effects. So fundamentals, here we go. The first one is squash and stretch. Deforming an object's shape to exaggerate its flexibility and weight, maintaining the original volume of the object. We often do this with the property size by speed for particles like sparks, falling dust, or high velocity steam. The elongating of the particle as it approaches the ground gives a sense of acceleration and speed. Revisiting this example from earlier, squash and stretch is used beautifully and very simply here. The successful parry of the projectile is just an oval that's stretched out over time. The projectile itself, as it comes out of the guardian, is an oval and not a linear beam. Squashing of the oval emphasizes its movement. Number 2, anticipation. Preparing the viewer for a significant action to give them a clue as to what is happening next. This is often referred to as the wind-up. The most relatable real-world example of this is jumping. You anticipate a jump by bending your knees and crouching before pressing against the ground and leaping. This is especially useful for combat VFX to indicate that an attack is imminent. The glow on this player's staff prior to the release of the projectile supports a clear and cohesive anticipation. You can tell when he's about to let go. Boom. There are two distinct anticipatory effects occurring here. The first one is the energy drawn to the character's hand before the flames combust. And then the second is the sparks of energy drawn to the ring before it opens that portal of fire. Number 3, staging, or known as framing. Directing the viewer's attention to the main event. This is especially significant for first-person gameplay. If you're tasked to create an effect for first-person gameplay, or like an FPS, you would naturally frame the VFX to fit within the camera so that the player can see them. As VFX artists who likely don't have much control over camera work, it's our job to support the composition. Frame the main event without overwhelming the primary focus, unless the primary focus is the visual effects itself. The God of War franchise does an incredible job of framing. Framing takes the lead of their action sequences, making the scale of these enormous enemies even more imposing. And while you understand that Kratos is small in comparison to this dragon, he is not small in strength. The VFX in this particular sequence are not spectacularly magical or elaborate. It's mostly just blood, dust, debris, and a splash of sparks and electricity. But because they are exaggerated and properly framed, they underline the action instead of overwhelming it. Number 4, straight ahead action and pose to pose. Straight ahead action is an animation made frame by frame, creating fluid movement. Pose to pose begins by applying major keyframe beats and then filling in between frames later. This is useful for blocking in an effect with your most impactful frames established first. This principle is uniquely challenging to apply to 3D visual effects. It's primarily useful to apply to 2D or hand-drawn visual effects. But here is, I'm going to present you some examples from Visual Effects VFX Apprentice provided by Jason Kaiser. Shout out to Jason, thanks so much. But here is an example of the straight ahead action. So as you can see, we have basically an animation drawn out frame by frame, and it's drawn from the left to the right. The first frame is the first drawing, second frame is the second drawing, third frame is the third drawing, and so on. And we're animating this frame by frame from the beginning. Whereas pose to pose, we're going to draw the first frame and maybe the last one. Or sorry, we'll draw the first frame and the last one and maybe the one in the middle, just so that we have a place to kind of anchor our general planning for our visual effect or animation. So you'll see the first frame is the first drawing, the final frame is the second drawing, and then the center frame, the middle frame of the animation is the third drawing. And then we go back and fill in what's missing in between. Number 5, follow through and overlapping action. These are two closely related techniques which help to render movement more realistically and indicate inertia, a property of matter in real-world physics. You experience inertia when you stomp on the brakes in your car to avoid hitting a car in front of you. Your car stops, but your body continues to move forward until your seatbelt stops. The blade swipe and the movement of all the sparks in this effect are examples of follow-through and overlap. Sparks coming off the sword blade throughout the entire animation continue to travel radially away from the character, emphasizing the velocity of the blade swipe and the group of sparks that continue traveling backwards once the swipe is complete have significant inertia. And this underlines just the power of the action and the movement. In this example, the follow-through action is the second splash. When water is displaced by the character's body, there's an initial splash outward, and then the water rushes in to fill the empty space, which creates the second splash upward. Number 6, slow in and slow out, mimicking acceleration and deceleration to align with real-world physics. Just as the movement of a pendulum slows at each of its crests before swinging back the way it came. We as visual effects artists use this everywhere, not only in movement, but in the curves and graphs that we use to drive properties of our effects. So whether or not a texture is fading in, the color is fading in and then fading out, or maybe we have a dust sprite that is being emitted and it comes out of the emitter and then slowly stops to hit air resistance. It is slowing out. But we use this in many properties, whether it's velocity, speed, scale, color, etc. It appears more natural. So here's just an example of a sprite that is being, the alpha of the sprite is being driven by each of these curves. The one on the left is a slow in, slow out, or an auto curve, and then the one on the right is more linear. You can sort of see the difference in we get to appreciate the texture just a hair longer with the linear, but with the slow in, slow out curve, we can appreciate the eroded shapes a little bit longer. We also use slow in, slow out, making dust, as I said before, or smoke visual effects to indicate the natural occurrence of drag, a force that opposes the motion of an object relative to the surrounding fluid or air. I made an obscene amount of dust in God of War Ragnarok. It's a very dusty game. I relied heavily on the use of drag or slow out to make dust sprites appear to experience air resistance. Number 7, arc. The most natural of all object movement in the physical world. Straight line movements can make movement feel stiff or mechanical, and even high velocity objects move in an arc if given enough space to fall back to the earth, such as a projectile. Our limbs are pendulums fixed at one point and swinging at the other, creating an arc. So the blood exiting the model's head here moves in a natural arc. If it moved straight down or straight out, it would look unnatural, but since it has a pressure force from the body pushing it out and then the force of gravity pulling it down, the resulting movement is an arc. Another great example of arc movement in relation to the movement of our limbs. You can kind of think of each blade swipe like the trail of a swinging pendulum. Number 8, secondary action. The movement or details that support and emphasize the main action. Secondary action adds dimension and grounds the action in reality. This is not to be confused with overlapping action. In this animation, the primary action is the lifting of the box. The secondary action is the character rubbing his hands together before he lifts it. Although it's not a necessary detail, it emphasizes the primary action and it gives the character, gives the figure a little bit of character. Okay, in this example, we have tons of secondary stuff. We have these icons and emotes that accompany and emphasize the shapes and the movement. Little skull flash upon the third impact, and then this crown, as well as the little drips that fall from this very graphic. There we go. very graphic slash. These are all secondary actions. Secondary action here would be the linear impact lines paired with the arcs. They underline the impact of the attack. They provide a unique and interesting visual to indicate that the player has struck the enemies. Number 9, timing. The duration of an action or the number of frames between two significant actions. Well-timed visual effects makes the difference between an impactful explosion and an awkward flash. It can give a visual a proper sense of strength, weight, or velocity. The difference in timing between the ball on the left kind of makes it feel lighter than the ball on the right. The ball on the left might be a dodgeball, whereas the ball on the right could be a bowling ball, simply indicated from an alternative use in timing. Revisiting this example, we see effective use of timing in combat games all the time. Timing gives the player the opportunity to parry or dodge an enemy attack, teach the player visually how to predict combat, or indicate the power and weight of an enemy or its weapons, like this one. There's a brief moment of hesitation mid-leap to inform the viewer that this attack is going to do significant heavy damage. The use of timing in this effect is excellent in its execution for multiple reasons. The initial flash is very small. The secondary impact is very bright and gratifying. The main use of timing here is in the in the lifetime of the individual elements. We have a light, a bright cone, an iridescent cone, and some residual ribbons. The largest and brightest effects live very briefly, underlining the impact, but the residual elements, they hang around just long enough to give the visual a dreamy effect that is unique to this Mind Flayer species in Baldur's Gate 3, and it supports the scale of the effect as well. Effective timing is an important tool for supporting scale. On the left, all the elements of this explosion live for a very brief amount of time, whereas on the right, these elements of the explosion live for a long time. Even the small bits of debris in the large explosion move slowly to emphasize the great amount of space that they have to take up in relation to the viewer. The implied scale of both explosions is directly supported by their timing. Number 10, exaggeration. A heavy-handed way to approach visual elements or motion. The level of exaggeration depends on the amount of realism you aim to execute. Less exaggeration is more realistic. More exaggeration evokes stylization. And exaggeration is not limited to motion. We can exaggerate with color, timing, scale, spawn count, lifetime. The Doom franchise has a lot of fun with exaggeration. The main appeal of these games is slaying tons and tons of demons. Filling the entire screen with gratuitous blood, gore, and flashy loot rewards the player visually. One could argue that the main mechanic of Doom franchise is not combat, it's catharsis. And it's done beautifully through framing and visual effects. The more you slay, the more you want to play, and the more that you're rewarded. Number 11, solid drawing. Accounting for your elements existing in a three-dimensional space, considering volume, weight, balance, and perspective. This requires a basic understanding of physics, as most of the principles do, light and shadow, but it doesn't require a physics degree to execute effectively. Also true of the rest of our principles. This principle is especially significant to 2D effects. The artist is taking advantage of 3D meshes and hand-drawn lighting to convince the eye that these flat textures have depth. The lighting and framing of these clouds on staggered planes also is giving us the atmospheric effect of distance. Number 12, appeal. The principle anyone with functioning eyes can understand. Playing up traits such as charisma, color, flamboyance, symmetry, satisfaction, or catharsis. We achieve appeal in many ways with our visual effects, and each approach can be supported by any of the principles we just went over. Appeal is one of the main purposes of visual effects. Our work makes animations, environments, and actions more interesting to look at and engage with. This principle is even the embodiment of satisfaction as far as why we should care about visual literacy. Why should your audience look at your visual effects if it's not appealing? Impactful, satisfying, dreamy, dangerous, cathartic. While all of these examples embody many principles that we just learned, I have collected these specifically because they are simply appealing. So let's put these principles to work. I whipped together a series of effects. We have a wind up, a projectile, wind up, a launch, a projectile, and an impact. We'll go through each of these 3 phases, and then I'll apply the animation principles to them that we just learned to improve it. So, beginning with the wind up and the launch. There's no effect indicating the release. It's very sudden, and the dynamic movement of the character pulling her arm back has no emphasis or overlapping action, which is something we can add from the get-go. Yeah, no cohesion between summoning the orb and releasing it. So to address this, added some anticipation. I increase the scale of the orb over time. And then to add follow through and overlapping action, I add sparks to the orb to complement the primary element, the orb. And then the sparks are now living in world space to suggest inertia so that they follow the animated movement of the character. So now this connects a little bit more, connects better visually to the projectile. And then I also added a little burst of star sprites upon the release for a little more emphasis on the follow through and overlap, but also for some appeal. So compare before and after, a little bit more appealing. The trail of sparks creates a bonus arc. So bonus principle has been applied, and it complements the animation. All right, so moving on to the projectile. There are only 2 elements. It's very generic. We have an orb and a trail of sparks. And the trail is very underwhelming, not very satisfying to watch, very generic, flat, and boring. And I made this effect, so I'm allowed to hate on it. So to address these things, for follow through and overlapping action, I gave the projectile a tail. This supports the path of the projectile. I also scaled down the sphere emitter of the original sparks. So the tail of sparks is a little more condensed. It's easier to follow, and it's easier to follow with the eye. And then I added some curl noise to those sparks so that motion's a little more interesting. Got a few little curly cues in there. And then to address the principal solid drawing, I layered a bright core to the head of the orb to give it depth. The tail also supports the appearance of depth as it travels away. And the trail is much more satisfying, especially as it falls. And of course, I added my little stars to make it a little more cohesive with our launch. All right, before and after. Really the only new element that I added to this effect were the stars. I used all the elements that were already present. I just adjusted them, simply using the principles as a guide. So we have a much more interesting visual here with the projectile. It's fun to look at. It'll make the player want to launch this projectile. Now let's address the impact. So the smoke is so lacking in depth that you can't even tell the particles are emitting from a shape. The smoke movement is also very uniform. There's no air resistance. They sort of just, the velocity comes out and that's it. They die. The light rays from the impact also disappear very suddenly. And the scale of the impact is very underwhelming. When you have an explosion, you want it to dazzle and wow. This one just feels a little bit undazzling. And it does need our magical star projectiles to connect visually with our wind up and projectile tail. So what did I do? I added a light to give this more depth. I also applied a fake light to the floor to increase and emphasize that depth even more. And then I adjusted the shape of the emitters for the smoke and I increased their scale so that there are much more particles as well as they're taking up much more space. But the emitter for the smoke was originally a sphere, and instead of using a sphere, I am using two emitters. One of them is a donut or a torus, and those smoke that emits the smoke outward, whereas our cylinder emitter for the second one, duplicated smoke emitter, moves the smoke upwards. Very similar to our water example from Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild. I applied squash and stretch to our light rays, which adjusts over time. And then for appeal, of course, I added our star particles. And then to address timing, I simply staggered the emitter times. So instead of everything firing off all at once, we have let's watch this from the beginning. We have our original impact. There we go, which is a light. And then our rays, and then our smoke particles. And just staggering these by a quarter of a second, maybe even less than that, allows us to have kind of this rhythm of like cause and effect rather than projectile hits the ground, boom, particles. There's a story being told visually rather than suggested. And then for slow in and slow out, I added drag to our smoke particles and extended their lifetime. So as they are emitted out, they slow down and they live just a little longer to exaggerate or emphasize the effect of air resistance. Makes it feel like it exists in a real space. So before and after, again, the only new element that I added were these star particles. Everything else, the elements are exactly the same. I just adjusted the emitter shape. I adjusted the timing that the emitters go off, and whether or not these rays are, sorry, the scale of the rays is being adjusted over time. The only new thing are the sparkles, the sparks, sparkles, star sparkles. Starkles? No. Okay, well, as you can see here, we've got a lot more interesting visual literacy going on. We can feel the cause and effect. These rays that scale out and then scale back in also draw the eye back to the center of the effect so that the viewer can kind of appreciate what's going on there. So let's go over the before once more. And our after. And then I'm going to add one more thing for a little more appeal, of course, color. And this also helps add some more depth to our smoke particles because when they are layered over each other a little too densely, they can cause flatness and squash our attempt to make it appear to be happening in a 3D space. And that's it, folks. This QR code doesn't work, so please don't scan it. No scan. All right,
Oh,
Jess.
oh, I was muted. Sorry. I was talking and then I realized I
Yeah,
was
that's all
muted.
right.
Yeah, don't scan the QR code.
It's expired. I mean, it won't work anyway.
That's fair. That's fair. That was fantastic. Thank you
Thanks.
so much. I wanted to let everyone in chat know that if they have any questions for you about the presentation or just in general, to go ahead and drop them in chat right now. But as you were presenting, a wild elder appears commented, I love the sheer amount of details to the overall scene action. It's truly amazing to see the 12 principles broken down with the help of the visual aids. And I think that's such an awesome comment because I would 100% agree with that. And
Awesome.
what's really cool about watching this presentation is, as someone who isn't a traditional artist myself, it's cool to see that things like art can be taught and be learned. Whereas I always thought it was like a natural skill that you had to be born with to be good at it. And so seeing a presentation like that where you can break down like the specific things that really add these perks to your art is, I think, very beneficial. So,
Absolutely.
and
And to add to that, as someone who I grew up with a pencil and a paintbrush in my hand, but you can become good at anything if you just do it repeatedly. And one of the great things about giving this presentation for me repeatedly is that I'm really like drilling these principles into my head. And despite learning them, presenting them to people and sharing them, I still use the repetition to bolster my abilities. So
that's awesome.
even those of us who feel like we were born with a talent, we still need these refreshers.
Yeah, yeah. It's good to have that foundation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, Looking to see. Oh, there's a lot of people just complimenting your presentation.
They are. Thanks, folks.
Yeah, yeah. That was really nice. A good
Here's a good
refresh.
question. Where did we source the example animation? The example animations, I assume the ones that you mean are from the principal slides. So those are from, if you are literally, if you just Google the 12 principles of animation, the first thing that comes up is a YouTube video by Alan Becker called The 12 Principles of Animation. And it is like the most simple, bare bones presentation of the 12 principles for specifically animation that you can find on the internet. And it's always like the first thing that comes up. But I figured if I have whatever I'm learning from like the bare bones, first thing that comes up on Google, that is good enough to present to you as well.
Nice, nice.
Great question. And I'm glad it
Yeah,
was asked. That's usually something I bring up and I skipped right over it. Shout out to Alan Becker.
yeah. Thank you, Bites When Bitten.
Oh, the
Um,
character animation.
mm,
So that's another great question. So on Unreal Marketplace, which I actually think they may call it something different now, there is a series of characters you can download from Paragon, and this one I think is called Paragon Phase. But there are several characters, and they have tons of animations that have attacks or idle or whatever. You can like mash them up together to create like a wind up, a launch, etc. But I actually used all Paragon characters in my very first visual effects reel to like have something to put my effects on. But they're all free, so go nuts.
we like free. And
Yes.
yeah, Dan mentioned it's Fab Marketplace
Fab
now.
Marketplace. Yes, I
FAB,
learned
yeah.
that recently.
Yeah, they did change it. Um, and then a wild elder appears, says, what is your method for managing and prioritizing multiple fast moving tasks? Do you typically start with the initial scene slash animation? How do you approach it?
For prioritizing multiple fast moving tasks. I typically go by the priority from the client or whoever is owning the task that I'm making. Whatever is the biggest priority is what I start with. Uh, Starting with initial scene animation. This is a very complex question. It's got multiple parts. But yeah, I start with I prioritize whatever the task owner's priority is. And if you're not really sure where to start, I would visit the principal pose to pose versus straight ahead action, kind of use that as inspiration. Uh, you kind of like pick the most important parts of the effect, like okay, the launch and the impact maybe, and you block those out first, essentially.
Yeah, we actually have a first time chat. Let me see if I can. Udar Bite. I'm so sorry if I said that wrong. I know I did. Question. I love the presentation. Can you speak to how VFX artists think about these principles when it comes to accessibility or things like in game hints, like something sparkling to show where to go on the map?
I love this question because I am actually this year preparing another GDC lecture on color, and a big chunk of it is going to be about accessibility. Um, that it's this is a question that could have a lot of answers. For for starting out, I would assess the color of the scene. There's definitely a way to approach color accessibility that is organized. And by that I mean like understanding what are like the most common color uh, blindness types. But if anything, all the principles support accessibility because they are doing things like preparing you for an action or indicating like exactly where the focus and emphasis is or where we want the player to be looking or focusing. I think God of War, and this is why there's so many God of War examples in my presentation, not just because I worked on Ragnarok, but they won the accessibility award the year that it was released in 2019, I think. And no, that's not right. But yeah, God of War Ragnarok won an accessibility award um, because they just like they have so many options. But that's I'm sorry, let me go back. They have so many options in accessibility gameplay. And that's not necessarily something that like each VFX artist sits down and addresses. Like that's a whole separate team. They have a whole team for accessibility and making sure that this game is easier to play with people with disabilities or challenges. Um, this is such a great question, and again, there are so many answers to this. But stay tuned for next year's GDC lecture, I suppose. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, I think. Oh, we have more questions coming in. Okay. Um, the last person said thank you. That makes sense. I appreciate that. And then Nihana, first time chatter. Hello. Thank you for the great presentation. Do you have any suggestions on how to start to consistently incorporate these 12 principles when making an effect from scratch each time?
Each time. I don't typically, when I'm making an effect, I don't typically have the 12 principles on my mind. I'm usually, and now I have ADHD, so my brain works a little differently than everybody else's, but um, I will like block in an effect or, throw spaghetti at a wall until something sticks. And when something begins to stick, that is when I come back to my principles. And I'm like, okay, let me address something. Let's read through this list and then ask myself, is this missing anticipation? Is this missing emphasis? Is there a way I could frame this better? And it's almost like a checklist of questions you ask yourself, rather than like, okay, I'm gonna arm myself with timing and emphasis, and I'm gonna make an effect. It's more like a guide and a support rather than principles that you just walk in with like in your right fist when you're making effects. That's a great question.
Absolutely.
These are all great
Producer
questions.
Producer Julian chiming in here real quick,
Hello.
just because we have a question. This is our first time streaming on YouTube simultaneously as Twitch,
Ooh.
and we have a question from YouTube, from our YouTube
Awesome.
audience. Um, Cars with a K says, question for Rachel: what secondary technical art skills have been the most useful in tandem with VFX, i.e., shader development, tool creation, asset creation, etc.?
Shader development for sure, and I'm probably just saying that because I think that's one of I love making shaders, but I think that I still have so much more to learn. You can do so much with shaders in and incorporate things like timing and emphasis with, but just like the technical understanding and yeah, just the general technical understanding of shaders, I think is extremely powerful to have a skill to have in tandem with visual effects.
Nice. And by the way, YouTube, our Twitch chat is saying hello to the YouTube chat. So welcome,
really cute.
welcome. Yeah. Yep.
Let me put it on stream so that they can see it.
Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah.
So there we go. They'll be able to see it.
Very
The
cool.
little wave.
Thanks, and battle.
Yeah, and also I was going to say we got some new followers while you were presenting, so I just wanted to say hi to them real quick. We
Awesome.
have Connery Zahn, Nihana, who we just heard from, Bites When Bitten, who we heard from earlier too, John Henley Montreal, and Skelzoa. So welcome, all our new
Bites when bitten.
followers.
That's an. I assume that's spelled BYTE.
No, no, it's
Really?
B-I-T. Yeah, B-I-T-E. Yep.
This is awesome. I'm going to put it on stream. We've got
Hi,
YouTube now
Twitch.
saying hi back to Twitch.
Oh, cute. Love it.
Twitch and YouTube chats are.
Yes, everyone talking, chatting together. I love
Rachel,
it.
you're uniting the digital sphere. You're uniting the
I
platforms.
am.
We'll
I
put that
love
as
it.
your lower third next time, Rachel.
Uniter of platforms.
But yeah, it looks like that was all the questions. I just want to let everyone know that if you missed anything or if you came in the middle of this presentation, everything will be on YouTube. I think after we end the stream, it should upload there immediately since we're broadcasting live on our YouTube channel right now. You can see all of our social channels right here on screen. And also, I wanted to promote our next BFX-U Spotlight session. That is happening Wednesday, May 6th. It is called Controlled Chaos with VFX artist and senior 3D generalist Tyson Hill. So be sure to mark your calendars for that. And also, our second episode of our portfolio review sessions are opening up, I believe next week is what submissions will be opening next week. Also, keep an eye on our social media. If you are a VFX artist and would like to submit for a chance to have your portfolio reviewed on our live stream by some VFX directors or senior members of our team, please do so. This will be our second episode, and that will be going live May 27th. The live stream will be May 27th. But submissions, like I said, will be opening up next week. So stay tuned to our social channels to see when those open so you can apply. But I think that's it for now. Rachel, once again, thank you so much for being our pilot episode on this.
Of course, it is my honor.
Julian is clapping here.
Yes. Thanks, producer Julian.
Yeah,
Loading
yeah.
those, Julian. Yeah, thank you everyone for coming to watch. I
Yeah.
hope you learned something today.
And do you have any like any accounts that you want to promote where people can come chat with you more, like an Instagram or Twitter that you'd like to?
Yeah, sure. I'm on Instagram at. Ooh, can we put this out here? It's spelled funny. We put it in chat.
Yeah.
It's technically at Quite VFX, Quite VFX. It's just
I
kind
love
of a
that.
play on my last name. On
I think that's
Instagram.
brilliant.
It's both my like VFX and personal, so we can chat about VFX. We chat about cars.
Cars, yeah. There
Yeah.
you go. Cool. Okay. Well, thank you again, everyone. Thank you for joining our first BFX-U Spotlight session. We will be back on May 6th. And once again, stay tuned to our social media channels for any more announcements about live streams, the portfolio review, and overall just cool stuff. Until next time.
Until next time.
Thanks again,
guys.
Rachel. Bye.